Good day and welcome America and beyond. I'm Tom Donahue for Tom Donahue Reports and The Briefing. Back to the Epstein Files, and some may say, well, haven't you covered this enough? No, knucklehead. No, Nimrod. If you want to take a trip down Numbnuts Lane, then go and listen to some other nonsense, okay? No, I'm going to continue on with this, and I did make note in the last podcast that I do plan to spend considerable time on Charlie Kirk's assassination. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories and there's a lot of inconsistencies, and I will address those to the best of my knowledge, and I am kind of keeping up to speed on what's been investigated, what's been alleged, and so we'll try to get to the bottom of that too. That tragedy, that unspeakable tragedy. Now, I wanted to pick up where I left off with some of these headlines that I think can be useful, that can be instructive, and you could rely upon as we continue to build this case and try to reconcile justice. So I left off talking about Kash Patel. You know, he looks like a deer in the headlights. A creepy guy, a strange guy, a weirdo. I never liked him before, and I certainly don't. I like him a lot less now. But some say, well, he says he's a conservative and he did some things. Yeah, right. Okay, sure. A complete disaster as FBI director. But yeah, he was losing his temper at the hearings, and he didn't present well, okay? Not only did he not look well in terms of the visuals, the optics, but the delivery was awful. But where I left off, and I was just aghast that he said that he had no evidence, credible evidence, that women were sex trafficked to anyone but to himself, which is an absurd statement. It's insanity. It's nonsensical. It's completely preposterous to even suggest when you have two convictions for sex trafficking, Epstein and Maxwell, and the fact is that both were about to serve their terms. One is now we talked about plush, cozy camp, which she's the only person, Maxwell, in the history of the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, to ever be transferred to the lowest security facility possible, which is a camp, which has minimum fencing, minimum security. Any sex crime that's charged and there's a conviction, you cannot, under any circumstances, ever, no matter what you do, you could be a model prisoner, you can wheel, you can deal, you can have the best lawyers, you cannot. It's never happened. So why did it happen in this case? And we still don't have the answers. And Trump always says he doesn't know and he doesn't talk to his department heads. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So beyond Kash Patel's meltdowns and lack of credible defense for his actions or the lack thereof, the Republican grilled him on Epstein's alleged accomplices. Now, his accomplices, on Epstein's alleged accomplices, and the list is 20 or more people, okay? Now, if you have accomplices, and if you have associates, and if you are sharing these women, these young women, with those associates, that's sex trafficking. And if you're flying them from one state to another or one state to another island or a country, that is, violations of federal laws that pertain to sex trafficking. Now, at least I thought I mentioned, but I'm not sure if it actually made it onto the last podcast, but Epstein threatened to destroy the Duchess of York in a Hannibal Lecter-like phone call, was found unconscious and unresponsive in his cell. This is shortly before his alleged suicide. The BOP writes up incident reports, and apparently that was not released until just recently. And so they found him in his cell, and he had a cellmate, which, again, that's new information for me. I don't know about you, but I hadn't heard that before. Remember, we talked about the orange blob and someone coming up the stairwell, and that was caught on video, even though there's a missing minute or two for each night, which was ridiculous in terms of their explanation. So we now know that he was attacked. Now, he said he was attacked when he came to, and he said it was a cellmate. Then he said that he really couldn't remember clearly. But there was no indication that he was trying to commit suicide at that time. And based on what the BOP guards wrote in the report, it was quite apparent that he was attacked. Now, we've talked in the past about the fact that his brother had one of the world famous forensic experts do an independent private autopsy. And by all indication, Dr. Bodden said that all signs point to a homicide and not a suicide. And the people that knew Epstein, not only his family members, but they all said that he wasn't suicidal, that he was going to fight this legally, and we now know, based on the raid in his mansion in New York City, that he compiled dozens and dozens of videotapes because he had surveillance equipment. And then I was alluding to the fact that one of Trump's cabinet heads said that yes, Epstein was known for blackmailing people, and that he was recording people in compromising positions. So we'll get to more detail on that later. Trump is still moaning and complaining. He doesn't understand why people are still interested in this. He says it's a Democrat hoax, that dead issue, people are losers, and you heard all the nasty words describing people in the MAGA base that are seeking truth in this matter. But the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump complained to aides that people just don't understand the Epstein situation because Palm Beach in the 90s was a different time. Yeah, just like the 80s and the 90s in Studio 54 in New York. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of what was going on in that den of debauchery in that. Actually, it was considered the largest mansion in New York City, okay? And so Epstein's mansion there, Trump would visit very, very often, a frequent visitor. And as we know, they were best of friends for more than a dozen years. They said well over a decade. And Epstein had a picture of Trump on his desk. Epstein talked about Trump all the time. They called each other often. They visited often. They hung out. They spent time. They were best of pals. That leads me to the next thing, and that is, I think the month of September was Friendship Month or Friendship Week, but we have all these declared holidays and those that are unofficial, and so this had something to do with friendship. And a sculptor actually put together a sculpture, a statue that shows Epstein and Trump hand in hand, frolicking together as best friends. And so initially it went up at the National Mall in D.C., near the Capitol, and it was taken down, or at least they were told that they had to take it down. And then it reappeared, and now with the government shutdown, there's nobody there to enforce that. And so their visitors are flocking to this sculpture, this statue. And you even had MAGA faithful that have visited the sculpture, and they were interviewed, and they said, we love Trump, these MAGA fans, but they're still demanding that Trump release these files. Otherwise, it's sketchy why he won't. Now I want to describe something that I feel is not only political gamesmanship, but it's despicable, it's detestable, it's heinous. It's just horrific that the Republican leadership refused to swear in a newly elected Democrat representative, delaying her swearing in, which is a constitutional duty, and she was dutifully elected, because by virtue of swearing her in to become official representative in the House, it tips the scales in favor of a successful conclusion to the Epstein discharge petition and the release of all the files. So the Republicans are refusing to have her sworn in. Now, the Epstein survivors are going to do a round two, and they're going to reemerge at the Capitol. They're going to reconvene and show, a force to be reckoned with, and speaking of force, try to force the files to be released. So it's good that they are returning. Trump still refuses to meet with any of them. Trump has no empathy or no interest. So that's certainly a dubious distinction. Now, Speaker Johnson was pressed just this past weekend on his refusal to swear in the Congresswoman who is likely an Epstein Files swing vote. So he is getting pressed on that. Doesn't have any answers, or refuses to answer, or dodges. It's the Trump strategy: divert, distract. This just got released, and so this brings you up to date or fairly close if I get my editing done quickly. Epstein Island received more than 2,300 previously unreported flights, new data uncovered. Wow. So that means that there's a lot of flights in and out of there. I mean, over 2,300 that were not part of any kind of evidence, that it wasn't in the public domain. Over 2,300, this little island. And there's nothing else there but Epstein's shenanigans, Epstein's den of debauchery. Now, the Supreme Court rejected, because they didn't hear it, meaning they rejected but didn't want to hear Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal. So the co-conspirator to Epstein will remain in a cushy camp. And Trump is not ruling out pardoning her. I'm telling you, Trump has no idea that he thinks that he can get away with, and I know he said he could shoot someone in Fifth Avenue or in broad daylight, and his base would never turn. Well, you give a pardon to a sex trafficker. It's bad enough your administration allowed for the transfer to a camp, which is the only known case in the history of the BOP. But if you pardon her, and there's even talk that he might pardon Diddy. I mean, if you're a celebrity or you become a friend of Trump, he doesn't care what you've done. Doesn't care. Doesn't care who's been hurt. It's just a very shoddy operation in terms of who gets pardons, and that's not that unusual when you look back at the other presidents. One thing I want to get to is that besides Trump's big, beautiful bill, which Republicans used to say, we don't want big government, we don't want big bills, we don't want big debts, we don't want big brother, and wow, we got it all with Trump. There is no America first with Trump. It's Trump first. That's it. And it's his world and we're living in it. That's where we're at right now. Okay, Tyrant Trump. And yes, there's days where I cheer because there's some really good things that happen in spite of this maniac. And some of you that are new to this, you might say, oh, you never voted for Trump. I did vote for him twice. Never liked him personally, but because he adopted our policies, there's not an original thought, original idea in that scatterbrain of Trump's, okay? It was all borrowed, and I've gone through that, in tremendous detail in previous shows. But the thing that really is getting to me is these executive orders. There's no president that's issued this many. Now, I don't have a problem with issuing executive orders to counteract Biden and Obama, okay? But all these other, that's not just a rescinding of the damage that was created by Obama and Biden. But I just don't like all this executive power, and I don't like all this international intrigue and interventionism. And so Trump's become more of a neocon. I mean, he's almost on the level of Bush and Cheney if you start really analyzing his actions. But that's my view, and I'm holding to it. Lots more to report in the coming days, and we're going to keep on the Epstein Files trail. We'll get to Charlie Kirk and the assassination and trying to get answers there. And we'll continue reporting on Tyrant Trump and his overreach and his iron fist of rule that's become too authoritarian. It doesn't resemble a constitutional limited republic. I should say constitutional republic, limited government by any means. So until we meet again, Tom Donahue Reports. Have a great day.